what do I want to do with my life? What do I value? What do I actually care about? Like, how is this affecting me emotionally, mentally? How is this affecting my personal life?
Hello Sales Nation and welcome to today's episode. Before I introduce today's guest, this episode has strong language from this moment onwards. Today's guest is Mark Manson. He's the author of The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Salespeople way too often care about all the little things and all the niggles and whether their customers like them and rejection. And these things do not move the needle. They do not matter over the kind of like decade or lifetime kind of perspective. And that's exactly what we're talking about in today's show. You can find out more about Mark over at markmanson.net. Everything we talk about is available in the show notes over at salesmanpodcast.com. As always, let's jump in to today's episode. Hi, Mark, and welcome to the Salesman Podcast.
Thanks, Will. It's good to be here.
I'm glad to have you on, mate. I feel like there's kind of a vibe and a bond, and I can feel where the conversation is going to go, even though we've only just clicked record, so I appreciate that, mate. And I've invited you on because I don't want to talk very specifically about sales, tactics, hacks, or anything like that on this episode. I've invited you on because I care, and this is crazy, but I care about the audience and their well-being and everything outside of sales as well. Salespeople, it's a stereotype, but it's true. They are kind of covered in rejection constantly by just the very nature of it. They take things super personally because they feel like they have to really care about the customer, even if the customer kind of doesn't want to speak to them and isn't returning voicemails or, goes even further and is being kind of abusive to them. The salesperson's got to kind of like suck it up. So they take things personally. They've got that stress. They've got that rejection. And what my old sales manager used to do, and I'll tee us up with this, kind of like open-ended to get your thoughts on it all. But my old sales manager literally used to say, stick a smile on your face and just get on with it.
Sure.
Is that the best approach to deal with all these weird emotions and stresses that are being thrown at sales professionals, Mark? Is that the best way to go about dealing with it?
I think it's probably a good short-term solution. Just grin and bear it can definitely be something that gets you through it. But I think if you're looking at more of a long-term, from like a career perspective, you start to have to dig a little bit deeper into like, what do I want to do with my life? What do I value? What do I actually care about? Like, how is this affecting me emotionally, mentally? How is this affecting my personal life, etc.?
So there's loads to go out with just that kind of like future sentences. But I want to build up to it before we get into the specifics, the action points, what we can take away and implement from this episode. And so for the people listening who have dealt with these kind of pressures by just absorbing them, and as a bloke, a lot of time I feel like I take all this stress and pressure, like screw it into a little ball and just like throw it back to the back of my brain, and it's probably going to make me turn into some kind of like crazy mental mass murderer in another 30 years if I continue doing this. So that's what I'm trying to avoid here. How much to set up kind of like the to not do that? How much of a competitive advantage is it, do you think, in sales, business, life in general, to have mechanisms to deal with and cope with and strategies to kind of like balance all this out? Do you think that is a competitive advantage in this kind of space?
Absolutely. I think one thing that gets overlooked in business a lot is that people's emotions are resources as well. So if you're coming into work feeling like crap every day, feeling depressed, unmotivated, getting really angry all the time, then that is a disadvantage. Like, you are being put at a disadvantage. If you're feeling great, if you're feeling very happy, you're going to be more motivated, you're going to be more resilient, persistent, and you're going to empathize with your customers and clients better. So that is also a huge advantage. So I see emotional management as actually a very important and under-discussed aspect of business success.
What would you say to the person who listening to this now and the instinctive reaction, perhaps they've not read a whole ton of books on personal development or books of yours that we'll come on to in a second. What do you say to those people who go, well, my emotions come and go, they kind of happen to me, as opposed to I'm proactively implementing them?
Sure. So I mean, emotions, it's a two-way street. Some days you're just gonna feel kind of crappy and gonna feel that at work, and you're gonna perform worse. But if you're doing a job that you hate, and I'm pretty sure everybody listening to this has at some point had to do work that they really, really didn't like, you notice that it affects you. It affects your mood. You go home feeling pretty sour. You're less motivated. You probably cut some corners, don't try as hard. And this also has an effect on your performance. So it can kind of create a cycle too. If you're finding yourself getting pushed onto certain work or certain clients that just make you miserable, it's going to lower your motivation. You're not going to be as productive, which will then make you just feel even worse about it. And it kind of just keeps going downhill.
So let's touch on this, and let's go super deep and super heavy, like within the first kind of 5 minutes of the show. Because I talk about this all the time, Mark, of if there's 20,000 people that'll download this in the first kind of like 60 days it goes live, there's going to be, whether that's 1, 2, 3%, perhaps even more, of people who are in sales, who are trying to improve themselves, who they know that there's a gap, and they feel it's a gap in their knowledge, versus perhaps they're just not right for sales, or they're not right for the company they're in, and they're trying to stick with it. They're told things like grit and perseverance are what makes a sales professional successful, and so they're drilled into them. And obviously sales management don't want to have to let people go, so they're working on them from this perseverance perspective. From an individual level, how do we know whether, not necessarily we should be in sales or not, because that's a separate conversation, how do we know whether we should care enough about our job, and how do we leverage this to kind of like make a decision to either put up with it and get through it, or make a change in our lives?
Again, I think it comes down to a short-term versus long-term perspective. I think anybody can kind of put up with some bullshit for 3, 6 months, maybe a year, but there comes a certain point where it just kind of eats away at you. And I think what we have to get good at is just observing it. Is this just a temporary situation? Is this, there's just one product in your company that you really don't like talking about, and you're just not excited about. And that's fine. You probably won't get stuck on it for the rest of your life. Or is this something that's very inherent to the job? Are you somebody who doesn't thrive engaging with people, or maybe you're not very extroverted? Maybe you don't deal with rejection very well, or maybe you just hate sitting on the phone all day, like it hurts your neck. Everybody has their different personalities, and so I think the important thing is to ask the question: is this something that is just situational, or is this something that is kind of inherent in like who I am, part of my personality?
And I know I'm asking you really tough questions here straight off the bat, but how do we know, in the grand scheme of things, if we've got like pain on one side and pleasure on the other, how do we know whether putting up with that is worth it? I guess and I'm not talking financially here, or anything like that, but how do we know whether, if where we are right now, and I guess this is like a scarcity mindset as well that I'm trying to put across, but whether we are right now, there's a little bit of pain, but if we move, there might be more pain, or there might be loads more pleasure. How do we know whether we're in the right spot or not?
I talk about this in my book. My approach to all of these sorts of questions is basically, life is shit wherever you go. There's going to be problems, no matter what job you have, no matter how much money you're making, no matter what career you choose. You're always going to be dealing with problems everywhere you go. And so the question isn't, how do I get rid of my problems? The question is, what problems do I enjoy dealing with? What problems invigorate me and excite me? And in my opinion, that's how you actually find a line of work or a purpose for yourself that is sustainable, that it's going to last, is you find that pain that you're willing to sustain. And I think in sales, it's that the problems that come with a sales job, it's the stuff you've been mentioning the whole episode. You probably mention every episode, dealing with rejection, sitting on the phone all day, dealing with clients who maybe aren't super respectful with you. And talking all day, every day. You have to ask yourself, are these the sorts of problems that I enjoy having? Some people can't stand those problems. Other people, they feel like pretty energized by it. They feel motivated. Like they wake up like excited. Like, you know what? I'm totally going to close that client today. Like that gets them fired up. And so what I always urge people is to stop looking for ways to get away from the discomfort. Just look for the discomfort that lights you up.
So let me just drill down into this, because this is super important, and this is a trend that I see with the successful salespeople and the entrepreneurs and the management that come on the show as well, in that they can embrace uncertainty, which for an entrepreneur even more so than salespeople is super important, and they can embrace the fact that there's somewhat of a grind. If it was clearly if it was easy, everyone would do it. That would lower the overall value of what the job was, whether it's sales, marketing, whatever it is. And so there wouldn't be the financial payoff on the other side of it. But what I want to get at here is, because I'm not sure on this myself, whether your approach and the best approach in general, Mark, are we taking these problems? So first step is obviously to become aware of them, whether we call them problems or whatever we want to kind of like define them as. Are we taking these problems and reframing them as challenges so that they're still there, but we get excited about solving them? Or are we genuinely just kind of being real about it all and just going, well, there is just shit with any job?
Well, they're both true, right? And I don't think you necessarily need to look at problems as a bad thing. I enjoy solving problems. I think everybody enjoys solving problems. The question is, I think we all just have to admit that not every problem, we don't have enough time and energy to deal with every problem in our life. So we have to be very selective about what we're willing to deal with. And this applies within, right now we're kind of talking at a meta level of like, should I be a salesman or not? Like, is this career for me? I mean, this also applies like within the career, within the job itself. As a salesperson, like you have to define certain values and boundaries for yourself. Like, what am I willing to do to get a client? What am I willing to put up with? What kind of treatment from my boss or from a prospective customer am I willing to? What lengths am I willing to go to? Things like that. I think everybody's going to draw those lines in slightly different places, and so this line of questioning becomes very important in terms of asking yourself, like, okay, what problems in this line of work am I okay dealing with, and what is just like going to drag me down and make me a miserable person? I think every line of work has to ask themselves that.
And how do we know where these lines are drawn? And because what I want to get at here is, I think there's a lot of people listening, and I've done this myself. I've put up with stuff, and then in a moment I've decided I'm not putting up with this pain in the ass customer anymore. They're gone. I'm not speaking to them. I don't need their business. And then you find two more customers that bring in way more revenue for half the kind of effort that you put into them, and they're really nice to deal with. But it's becoming aware and knowing the boundaries of all this. How do we decipher this, and are we in control of it as well? I guess is the forerunner to that question.
You definitely are in control of it, to a large extent, at least. And I think a lot of it's just trial and error. But I think a lot of it is, what you just brought up, I think is a very interesting point, in that it's kind of like dating, like when you're single and you're dating people, if you're constantly like desperately chasing every single person you go out on a date with, not only is it going to make the experience miserable for you, but you're probably going to have less success finding a relationship. Whereas if you kind of just sit back and say, look, I'm looking for a good match based on these values that I have. Like, here's what I have to offer. And I'm very clear about which people this is going to be good for. And so it's just a matter of like making that connection between what I have to offer and what certain people are looking for. Like you said, not only is it way less effort, but it ends up often being like much more profitable in the end. And so a lot of this is self-inflicted. It is people adopting this mindset of like, I have to close every customer, I have to chase every lead. And I think that's not only is that less effective in the long run as a salesperson, but it's also a ticket to make yourself feel very miserable on a day-to-day basis.
And why is that? Because clearly, some salespeople will close 99% of the business that's put in front of them. That's not the average salesperson or the average sales like kind of product, and it doesn't usually map out like that. I think the industry standard is around a 30 to 50% closing rate from people that are qualified and or have budget and all this kind of stuff. So what I'm getting at is, if this is all self-inflicted, why do we put ourselves through all this? Are we trained from a young age to want to give ourselves pain? If the answer is to embrace uncertainty to a certain extent, and to kind of pick and choose, and these are all sensible things that kind of a mentor would tell you, perhaps. Why do we all start off seemingly? I might be talking about my own personal experience here, but why do we all seemingly start off in this place where we are beating ourselves up constantly?
I think most people, so we're taught in school, and we're taught, through our culture and through other jobs that we have, that there's a directly proportional relationship between how hard we work, like how hard we beat our head against the wall, and our results. And that's true in school. Like the more you study in school, the better your grades are going to be. And a lot of jobs, if you work in a factory or on an assembly line, the more effort you put in, the more output you're going to create. That is true in most arenas of life. Where it's not true is human relationships. And sales is a form of human relationship. And there's, in a lot of situations, it's the more you push another person, or the more you push yourself to create these relationships with other people, the more you actually repel a lot of the results you desire. And so there has to be, one thing that's interesting about human relationships is that we have a tendency to a lot of it's built off of trust. And to trust somebody, you have to know that there's some higher value operating at the time. And so, if you think of just the very stereotypical sales situation of buying a car, if you're shopping for a car and a salesman is just pressuring the hell out of you, it's going to frustrate you and it's actually going to repel you. Whereas if you end up in a sales situation where the guy is just demonstrating the value of the specific cars you're looking at and trying to find out what you want and what's important to you, he's operating based on these higher values, not just hammering the sales through. It becomes there's trust there, and there's a more willing human relationship at work.
So I've got a quick tale on this. So obviously there's the stereotype of the used car salesperson. They get you onto the lot using whatever means necessary. Half the time it's some kind of big inflatable thing that's wobbling around, and you're looking at it, and the next thing you know, you sat down in the seat, kind of being grilled on how much money you can spend each month to get this car that you don't want. So I went with my dad to buy for him to buy. I wasn't treating him just yet, but he was buying a new car, and I went to what they call in the UK a car supermarket to have a kind of a chat. And obviously I've got the experience in sales and experience with buyers kind of thing. If this stereotype of a salesperson came out, I was happy and able to close them down kind of thing. And it was not that. It was the exact opposite, and it was a really nice buying experience. Walked in, kind of shook hands with the manager, as you kind of expect. And he takes us over to the desk of the individual sales rep, I guess you'd call him. And he was just like, right, what are you looking at? I was like, Dad was like, these Ford Cougars, and there's a Volvo, and there was something else he was looking at as well, a VW, and kind of 4x4 kind of SUV kind of bigger SUV kind of vehicles. So the guy was like, right, they are over there. I'll walk you over to them. So he walked us over, and we're just having a nice chat. No talking about cars, no pressure, no nothing. Get to them, and he goes, right, so in the window of each of the car, there is a number. Here's a piece of paper and a pen, or obviously it wasn't just a scrap of paper, it was a document to write them down. It's like, any car that you want to have a closer look at, I'm going to go back inside, just write down the number that's on the windscreen, and I'll give you the keys to that car. So wrote down a couple, went over, got got the keys. Then he was like, here's the keys. If you've got any questions, I'm here for you. If not, I'll just go back inside. And I think he was just getting loaded up on coffee every time he went back in because it was freezing outside. So I had a couple of questions. And then he was just like, well, if you want to buy one, the price is the price. There's no negotiation. There's no messing around on that front. We buy them, in mass or en masse so that we can offer the lowest price that we can physically offer with the margins to keep us all going. And so, that is the price. So the price was taken off the kind of conversation there with the rep. So we sat down, went through some numbers of insurance and things like this, and optional extras and things to add on to it. And it was very structured. So there's no manipulation. There's no ability to manipulate because he was almost going through a checklist of what he can offer, what he can't offer, and he was almost going through questions. And then Dad bought a car from him. And it was as simple as that. And it was a super nice experience. And it was the opposite experience of, obviously, the stereotype of the used car salesperson, which was really interesting to me. I ended up then spending an hour with the manager going over all this and having a chat with him and seeing kind of how they compare to smaller dealerships that are kind of doing things the traditional way. And apparently they fare really well as a business and as a model against that. And then the crazy thing is, my dad went to a party that night. And this sounds like hyperbole, but it's not. He went to a party that night, told another person, one of his mates, about the experience. And then this is on Wednesday when I went with my dad. On Friday, when my dad went to pick up the car, he went with his mate, and his mate bought a car from them as well. So, 20, 30, 40, 50 grand they've got out of like the two of them just through turning this on its head slightly. So now, I've told this huge tale. Clearly, a lot of the audience listening, they are screaming, but Will, what you just described is basically the salesperson being replaced by an online order form or an in-person order form, which is not my audience. So that's kind of like one end of the sales spectrum, and the other end is these kind of like really bespoke sales conversations that have to happen, as you're describing, Mark, on a deep human-to-human level, and you have to get on with the person that you're kind of communicating with. If you think they're a dickhead, that from their perspective to you, then there's no business going to happen. They just won't deal with you.
Let me just jump in here. I think there's more at work in that experience than just the automation. What made that experience, what also made that experience so pleasant, is the authenticity of it. Yeah. Is this guy had no ulterior motive. Mm-hmm. You didn't feel like he was always like he was about to underhand you at any given second. He was just very plain. He's like, "What are you looking for?" And you guys said what you're looking for, and he said, "This is what I can provide you. This is the information I can give you. If you need any help, I'm always available." And it's just a very pleasant, authentic human-to-human experience. And I think, especially in these days, in the days of the internet, when we're just being bombarded with like cheesy, pushy advertising constantly, I think that sort of authentic approach to sales is, there's a premium on it. Like people, like your dad's friend, like people are willing to pay for that. People are willing to seek that out.
Definitely. It's a differentiator. And when I was speaking to the manager, he was saying that the guys and girls who are, they've got titles that as kind of, it's not a sales title, but of course they are salespeople. They're leading you towards that decision and doing everything that they can. And obviously this is their angle to enable you to buy from them specifically. They're incentivized on an email that goes out after the fact, and the email asks the customer how they rated the experience of the whole thing. So that's how they're incentivized financially. So clearly that isn't the case for all. If I was selling medical devices like I was a few years ago, and I had to rely on a surgeon who kind of, right? Well, they don't have time to reply to an email like that. Never mind, kind of give you sucking up to them for them to give you a good response. So this isn't applicable for everyone. But I want to just go back to this idea of, again, of it all being self-inflicted, because that, I can't remember his name now. He's a really pleasant chap. And he'd probably appreciate a shout out on the show. But he obviously, he wasn't self-inflicting all this on himself, all this pressure, this stress, because he was incentivized in that way. He knew that if he just kind of is relaxed and chilled, he will get the incentive and he'll get the bonus, because that's kind of what they're pushing. But for someone who's listening to this now, Mark, again, getting super real with this, who has bills to pay, has a mortgage to pay, perhaps even has kids, or if not, is kind of maybe has a stupidly purchased expensive car that they've got to fund every month.
Yeah.
How do they become less, I don't know how to describe it, less bothered about the outcome, less outcome dependent, to give them this ability to have this cool, calm, charismatic kind of persona and not even a facade, but like personality when they deal with people, so that they can connect on these deep human to human levels? How do they give less of an F about everything so that they can have more of an F in success in it?
I think one thing when it comes to stuff like this is understanding that ultimately your control is limited. I think if obviously you want to do your best on every sales job, but I think it's probably very healthy for people to understand that there are some clients that are just not going to be closed no matter what you do. Like it's just not a right fit. It's not the right timing. It's not the right person or place. And then there are going to be some prospective clients that they're going to be closed no matter what. Like it's a perfect fit. The product's like right for them. And then you're going to have this kind of third category in the middle, which could go either way. And that's where like the real skill comes in, is like, okay, how can I, and let's just, for example's sake, let's say it's a third of each. So a third of them are just not going to be closed no matter what you do. A third of them, it's going to be easy. You basically just show up, sign the paperwork. And then a third, you're really going to have to push, convince them, persuade them, show them, what you have to offer. And not only is that realistic, but I find that helps in these sorts of situations in terms of stress levels. Because if you get caught up in a profession like sales, there's a lot of variance out there. Like you're going to have good months, you're going to have bad months, you're going to have great weeks, you're going to have bad weeks, you're going to have a hell afternoon. And a lot of that is just going to be out of your control. It's going to be completely up to random and chance. And so if you get caught up on every single sales job, obsessing over, closing every single thing and blaming yourself for everything that happens, you're probably going to drive yourself a little bit crazy, and it's going to become counterproductive. But understanding that ultimately the same way you play poker or you play some of these other games that rely on a lot of variability, that you're not going to win them all, and your goal is to simply win at the margins.
So do we need to have more perspective over the longer term versus being super narrow focused in the moment? Is that the kind of solution to this?
Yeah, in my opinion, yes.
Yeah. And I think just following on from that, something that we talked about on the show before, but you've kind of put a different spin on it, and it's in my brain at the moment, there's kind of neurons firing and two and two are coming together. A lot of this comes down to as well, if you've got a big, thick pipeline of potential customers to spend time with, you don't have to close every deal. And so you can knock yourself out of that mindset. And so perhaps some of this just comes down to getting the basics right and kind of putting in that grind up front, because obviously prospecting itself is where a lot of this rejection can take place. But if you can manage that rejection, it's almost like if you can offset that rejection up front to have a really robust pipeline with not 30% of each, but 60% of people that are really happy to close, and 15 and 15. That little bit of pain up front, it's probably going to help you out stress-wise, anxiety-wise, taking things personally-wise out the other end, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, and I think that's strategic. I mean, if you think about it, would you rather get rejected up front, or would you rather get rejected at the very end of the process? I mean, it might feel better to get rejected at the end of the process. Like you don't feel like you are being as rejected as a human being, but in terms of productivity, like you save yourself so much time. I mean, if you spend hours and hours on a client or a prospective customer, and like at the last minute they don't sign, that's hours wasted. So it's nice to set up filters up front and understand, like, before you even start, understand that your product is not for everybody. Your services are not for everybody. So get that out in front immediately. and then just qualify the hell out of them.
So I've got one final thing that I want to ask you to wrap up this part of the show. Then I've got 2 questions to ask everyone that comes on the show, Mark. What you're saying makes total sense. I mean, total agreement with everything you've said so far, and probably from the sound of things till the end of the show as well. But we're both aligned. We're both saying one thing. We're both saying, you've got to pick and choose your battles. You've got to embrace that there's going to be some pain if you want a reward out the other end of it. So that's part of life. It's part of the game of sales. It's naturally built into it because we're dealing with human to human kind of relationships. But so we're kind of on one shoulder of the audience, whether we're the devil or the angels, another conversation. On the other shoulder, you've got the sales manager saying, right, lads, girls, you got to crush it. You got to close every deal. Everything you go in, we've got targets to hit. You hit your targets, I hit my targets. I get to kind of like go on holiday this year. Otherwise, my kids are going to starve and blah, blah, blah. And there's pressure coming down from this perspective. How do we, again, and I'm asking you, like with empathy, genuinely wanted to know the answer to this. When we're getting pulled from one side to the other, and clearly the audience listens to shows like this, perhaps on the drive into work, and then they get to the office and they have the stereotype of the hothead sales manager who's bald, red-faced, driving around in a bright red BMW for attention. He or she is like yelling at them to close every deal, to get motivated. How do we deal with all of this? How do we become kind of like almost like stoic in our approach and comfortable and confident in ourselves?
I think that's another case. I mean, I said earlier that it's my personal belief that approach to motivation or approach to productivity of just try harder, just give it your all. It's when we're dealing with human relations. I mean, that may be true with like if you're doing cold calls or something. Like, yeah, you want to bust ass, get through X number of cold calls a day, but once you're face to face with a human or on the phone with a human, to me, that equation changes a little bit. And pushing harder, busting your ass, going balls to the wall, like whatever cliche you want to throw in there, like it's not necessarily more productive. And I think there's probably a perception. It probably feels like managing to like tell your sales team, yeah, boys, go get it. Like, go kick ass this week. That probably makes sense in the manager's head, and feels good and feels like they're doing their job to motivate you. But, ultimately, I think it's important to remember to, again, keep that broad picture in mind, keep the long-term perspective, understand that not every lead's going to come through, and then be strategic about that. Be like really reasonable and strategic about it, and that'll help you not take it personally. It'll help you not get miserable and like just feel like everything's a drudgery. And in my opinion, it makes for a more efficient sales process. Your customers appreciate you more, they become more loyal, and when you do find that hit, if you screen pretty hard up front and you do find that good fit, like closing them is that much easier.
I think you've touched on something here, and I said I'll wrap up the show with this, minus a couple of questions I ask everyone that comes on the show, Mark. You touched on something here, which I think is a huge kind of differentiator and a way to implement this, of if you are cold calling, or if you are doing crazy numbers of emails, or if you are doing loads of research before you make these calls, perhaps we should be like the cliches of hustling and all this kind of stuff. But then as soon as we're going to speak to a person, perhaps this is the way that we put it into practice, of we just stop, take a breath and change gear. And then we treat that person as an individual and have a conversation with them and go down this slightly different route of, being there for them and not doing any weird stuff, and being okay that they are a person. They are okay to not want what you're selling. Versus when you just see when you see people through an email, it's weird that you can get an email and the response isn't the same as being face to face or being over the phone with someone. You can get mad at an email and then you read it again 5 minutes later, and you're like, why was I mad at it? So maybe that's the kind of conclusion from our conversation, Mark. Maybe that's the way that we implement all of this, of when it's fine to go balls to the wall. It's fine to go all in when we're doing things that are kind of like research based or like repetitive tasks in sales. But as soon as we get to that conversation, we need to kind of take that moment to become conscious of it and just make that shift. And with that, Mark, I've got a couple of questions, as I said, mate, that I ask everyone that comes on the show. First one, other than your own, which we'll come on to in a second, what's one book or resource that you'd recommend to the Salesman podcast audience?
I come from the internet marketing world, and I'm a blogger and a writer. So my sales process on my website is pretty it's pretty soft. It's very, I mean, and a lot of it has to do with my brand. So it's I have a personal brand, so I'm not super pushy and like, telling people I'm going to change their lives in the next 48 hours or their money back guaranteed. But so I just say that to kind of give context. I really liked Gary Vaynerchuk's jab, jab, right hook. It's geared towards the context of internet marketing and particularly like social media and personal brand marketing. But I think there's some really, really good concepts in there, just in terms of, I think, how people's consumption habits are changing. Again, like we all have access to the internet, so we're all getting bombarded with really, really obnoxious advertising and like pushy sales stuff all the time. And I think that is affecting how we like to be sold to. And I think Gary Vee really has his thumb kind of on the pulse of that right now online.
Totally agree. I think sales is going to go, I'd go one step further than you. I'm certain sales is going to go down that jab, jab, right hook route of not necessarily like content, but probably more like industry insights, conversations, introductions. The salespeople, they might not even be called sales anymore. They'll be called business development or wherever it is. They'll be at the central hub of the little minute niche. So for me, medical devices, where my territory was like a 2-hour kind of car journey in like a circle around where I lived, it would be the focus on getting everyone, all the urologists that I'm selling to in that kind of area, to know me, to like me, to trust me. I don't have to constantly pitch them, but when they're ready to buy, when there's budget, I'm going to be top of mind. I'm going to be the first person to sell to. So we'll link to that book in the show notes to this episode. We talk about Gary Vee all the time, so it'll be cool. I think he's kind of verging the kind of boundaries of pop culture out of the world of marketing and business, and obviously is fringing on sales. So I appreciate that insight. No one else has mentioned that book though. Other people just talked about him. So that book is well worth picking up, Sales Nation. And Marco, one final question for you, mate. I know you're not an out and out kind of like sales professional. You're not on the phone like proactively closing deals every day, but you'll still have insights to this, I'm sure. If you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give him to help him become better at selling? Well,
it's interesting. So when I started my business, I started doing some consulting, and I struggled really hard. I started doing attending conferences and seminars, and I had to sell from the stage, and I would, get leads through phone numbers of attendees and call them up personally and pitch them on the phone. And sales did not come natural to me at all. And but my father has a background in sales. He's a business owner, and so I remember I had a long conversation with him one day, and I just told him, I was like, Dad, this does not feel natural. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I always feel like I shouldn't even be on the phone with this person. And his biggest tip to me was, he said, do you believe in what you're selling? Like, do you think this actually helps people and is useful? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, okay, then technically you're potentially doing all these people a favor. You're like making their lives easier. And I said, well, yeah. And he's like, so, all right, so you're helping people. Like, he's like, if it's not going to help them, they'll tell you. But you need to like go into it with a mindset of like you're improving the lives or the business of the people that you're speaking to. And so that was a big mental shift, because I think my default was just like, I need to make money. Here's my shit. Buy it, please. And that's a very uncomfortable place to come from. And but yeah, that one mental shift was like very helpful for me.
And let me just touch on this. I love that insight. I love the way you're shifting, you're reframing everything from like taking money and time and energy and resources to giving to people. And obviously you've got to, on a phone conversation, there's a little bit of value suck before you can offer them and give them value on the back end of it. But did your conversations, the content of them change? Or was it a shift in how you had those conversations? And it might be both, a bit of both, but what made the biggest difference?
It was a shift in how I had those conversations. And this comes full circle to what I was talking about, how emotions are a resource. Because I look at those early days and I was full of anxiety. I was insecure about what I was doing. And that reframe helped me become more confident about my product and more enthusiastic about it. And so after that, I started kind of going into sales calls, just like, you know what, I got a lot of shit to offer. So I'm just going to throw it out there and see how this person responds. And the responses got much better. And the phone calls got much more, there was a lot more engagement on the calls.
Definitely. Well, I think I've definitely not invented this. Someone else has definitely invented it. I'm just ripping it off and I can't think who said it. But and it might be someone on the show, I don't know. But someone's shared with me, and I take this really to heart, that sales is just a transfer of emotion. All you're trying to do is get someone else excited about your product or service so that they've got the opportunity then to implement it. You're trying to get them over that little hurdle of, don't know if I could be asked kind of like talking about this, to the excitement to get them over that. And I think what you just said sums that up and describes it perfectly. And with that, Mark, tell us a little bit about the book. We kind of like teased and touched on it. Tell us a little bit about the book and where we can find it and where we can find out more about you, sir.
Sure. So I'm the author of The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. It is a counterintuitive approach to living a good life. It's a New York Times bestseller for 3 months and counting now. It's been on the top 10 of Amazon as well. And my website is markmanson.net. I blog every other week, and there's hundreds of articles there about not just self-development, but a lot of the themes that we've been talking about here, how to approach your career, how to approach problems in your life, what really drives happiness and purpose. And basically people call it, I have a friend who tells people, he said, Mark writes self-help that for people who hate self-help. So it's a very no bullshit, very realistic approach to a lot of these questions in life. So check it out if you get a chance.
Amazing stuff. Mark, appreciate your time, your insights on all this. And I want to thank you for joining us on the Salesman Podcast.
Thanks, Will. It's good being here.